two strangers pass each other on a quiet street. Nothing remarkable happens, a brief nod perhaps, and then each continues on their way, thinking about dinner or a phone call or nothing at all. Neither one has any idea that, according to the actual mathematics of physics, something extraordinary just happened between them. Something that suggests the future itself, days of it, possibly more, may already exist, fixed and waiting. At the exact moment their paths crossed. I want to walk you through this carefully because it is one of the strangest, most rigorously argued conclusions in all of modern physics. And I think most people have never encountered it in its full, unsettling form. Throughout my career, I have returned to this particular argument again and again, not because it is complicated mathematically, but because it is almost too simple, and that simplicity is exactly what makes it so difficult to dismiss. Today we are going to walk through exactly why so many physicists believe the future is not an open, undetermined horizon waiting to be written, but something closer to a destination that, in some very real sense, already exists. And if you want to keep exploring the deepest, strangest consequences of Einstein's own mathematics with me, make sure you are subscribed, because I do not think you will ever think about two people passing on a sidewalk quite the same way again. Let us begin with something we have touched on before on this channel, but which deserves to be revisited slowly and carefully here, because everything else in this journey depends on it. Einstein's relativity tells us there is no single universal now shared by the entire universe. Two observers moving at different speeds relative to each other will genuinely, measurably disagree about which of two distant events happened first, each one correct within their own frame of reference, with no referee anywhere capable of declaring one of them wrong. This sounds abstract, almost like a technicality, until you actually run the numbers on something close to home, and I want to walk you through exactly that calculation now, because it was first laid out with startling clarity by physicist Roger Penrose, building on earlier work by philosophers Charles Reitdijk and Hilary Putnam, and it has come to be known as the Andromeda paradox. Picture the two strangers we started with, passing each other on that quiet street, one walking toward you, the other walking away, each moving at an entirely ordinary human walking pace. Now, instead of looking at anything nearby, let both of them turn their attention toward something almost incomprehensibly distant, the Andromeda galaxy, roughly 2.5 million light years away. Because of the relativity of simultaneity, each walker's personal now, the specific slice of events across the universe that counts as happening at the exact same moment as their own passing on the sidewalk, tilts very slightly depending on which direction they happen to be walking. Here is the part that genuinely stunned physicists when Penrose first calculated it precisely. Even at ordinary human walking speeds, nowhere close to the speed of light, that tiny tilt in each person's plane of simultaneity projected across 2.5 million light years of distance translates into a difference of several days, which means at the exact instant these two strangers pass each other, what counts as happening right now on Andromeda for one of them could already include events that for the other walker simply have not happened yet at all. Picture two enormous transparent sheets of glass, each one representing everything a single person considers to be happening at this exact moment, stretching outward across the entire universe. Tilt one sheet just slightly, the way a person walking in one direction naturally does, according to Einstein's mathematics, and by the time that sheet reaches all the way out to a galaxy 2.5 million light years away, the tilt has grown large enough to shift its edge by several full days compared to someone walking the opposite way. Neither sheet is wrong. Neither person is mistaken, and yet each of them is confidently living inside a now that genuinely, measurably disagrees with the other about several days' worth of events on a distant galaxy. Now follow this thought all the way through, because this is where the real weight of the argument lands. Whatever is happening on Andromeda right now, for the walker heading toward it, is, for the walker heading away, still several days in that person's own personal future. If that event is genuinely, definitely real for the first walker, happening in their now with the same solid, settled reality as the sidewalk beneath their own feet, then it must already be equally real, equally settled, equally existing, even though it technically sits within the second walker's future. There is no meaningful sense in which one version gets to be real, while the other remains a mere possibility, still waiting to be decided. Relativity gives us no mechanism anywhere in its mathematics for treating one observer's now as more genuinely real than another's. This is the argument in its full, quiet weight. Not a metaphor, not a philosophical flourish layered on top of the physics. A direct, calculated consequence of relativity itself, applied honestly, all the way through to its logical end. If any version of now can be equally real for any observer, anywhere moving at any ordinary speed, then events sitting within what feels like your own personal future may already possess exactly the same settled, existing reality as the version of now you are experiencing at this very instant. So, here is where the first part of our journey leaves us. Two strangers walking past each other on an entirely unremarkable street are enough, all on their own, to demonstrate that the future is not waiting somewhere out ahead of us, undetermined and unwritten. According to the very same mathematics that gives us GPS satellites and gravitational waves, it may already be there, existing every bit as solidly as the ground beneath your own feet right now. But if that is true, an uncomfortable question follows immediately behind it, one we have to take seriously rather than simply admire from a distance. What does this actually mean for choice, for decision, for the felt sense that you are, at this very moment, genuinely deciding what happens next? That is exactly where we are headed next. Stay with me. We walk through the Andromeda paradox together, discovering that two people passing on an ordinary street at ordinary walking speed are enough to show that events sitting in what feels like your own personal future may already be exactly as real, exactly as settled as the ground beneath your feet right now. But I left you with an uncomfortable question. If the future already exists in this way, what does that actually mean for choice, for decision, for the felt sense of deciding anything at all? Let me be honest with you about where this argument leads, because I think it deserves to be followed all the way through, without flinching. If future events already possess the same settled reality as the past, then the natural, uncomfortable implication is a view philosophers call determinism. The idea that every choice you will ever make, every word you are about to say, every decision that feels right now like it is genuinely still open or may already be fixed, sitting somewhere out along your own personal timeline, waiting for you to simply arrive at it. The way a traveler arrives at a city that was already standing there long before they ever set out toward it. Picture a chess match already finished, its entire sequence of moves recorded in full on a score sheet resting on the table. A newcomer, walking in partway through, watching the players still moving pieces, might reasonably assume the outcome remains genuinely undecided, hanging on whatever choices the players make next. But the score sheet, if it already exists in full, tells a different story, one where every move, including the ones neither player has physically made yet, was already settled from the very beginning. The players still feel like they are choosing. The paradox we walked through in the first part of this journey suggests that feeling and the finished score sheet might both somehow be true at once. This is precisely where quantum mechanics enters the conversation, and I think it deserves careful, honest treatment here, because it is often invoked far too quickly and far too casually as an easy escape hatch from everything we just established. Quantum mechanics tells us that certain events at the smallest scales appear to be genuinely fundamentally probabilistic, not merely unpredictable due to our own ignorance, but actually undetermined until some interaction forces a specific outcome to occur. Doesn't this mean the future, at least at the quantum level, remains genuinely open, contradicting everything the Andromeda paradox just showed us? The honest answer is that physicists remain seriously divided on exactly this question, and I want to walk you through both sides rather than pretend the matter is settled. Some physicists argue that once a quantum event does occur, it becomes part of the same fixed, four-dimensional structure as everything else, meaning the block universe picture survives largely intact. They're simply incorporating genuine quantum randomness as an additional ingredient baked permanently into that structure, rather than something that keeps the future perpetually open in any meaningful sense. Under a specific, seriously considered interpretation of quantum mechanics called the many worlds interpretation, every possible outcome of every quantum event actually occurs, each one branching into its own equally real, equally fixed timeline, meaning even quantum uncertainty ultimately resolves into a fully determined, if enormously more complicated, block of reality rather than a genuinely open one. Other physicists push back firmly against this picture, arguing that the moment of quantum measurement introduces something into physics that behaves nothing like the smooth, gapless determinism of classical relativity, a genuine branch point where reality has not yet settled into any single fixed outcome at all, keeping at least some meaningful notion of an open future alive, even if classical relativity alone seems to argue against it. This disagreement remains genuinely unresolved, sitting at the unfinished, actively debated seam between relativity and quantum mechanics, the exact same seam we have returned to more than once on this channel, the seam that still lacks a complete unifying theory to settle it. I do not want to leave you thinking physics has definitively closed the book on an open future, because it has not. But I also do not want to soften the genuine weight of the Andromeda paradox itself, which stands on its own, independent of how the quantum question eventually resolves, built entirely from relativity, one of the most thoroughly tested theories human beings have ever produced. So let me leave you with the way I have personally learned to sit with this, after returning to this argument many times over many years. Even if the score sheet already exists in full somewhere along the entire span of your life, you do not experience it that way. And I do not think that experience is somehow less real or less meaningful simply because a more complete four-dimensional picture might exist alongside it. The player moving pieces across the board still has to calculate, still has to care, still has to actually make the move one at a time, regardless of what the finished score sheet elsewhere might already record. Whatever the deepest structure of reality actually turns out to be, the felt experience of choosing, of caring about what happens next, remains the only vantage point any of us will ever actually get to occupy. So where does this leave us at the end of our journey together? Two strangers pass on a street, and in that small, unremarkable moment, the mathematics of relativity quietly suggest that days' worth of someone else's future may already be exactly as real as the sidewalk beneath their feet. Quantum mechanics complicates this picture without cleanly resolving it one way or the other. And what remains underneath all of this uncertainty is the simple, strange fact that you are here now, in whatever way now actually turns out to mean moving a single piece across a board that may or may not already contain its own finished ending. Exploring the honest, unresolved weight of arguments like this is exactly why I do this work and exactly why I wanted to walk through this particular journey with you. If this changed the way you think about your own next decision, then make sure you are subscribed so we can keep exploring these questions together. Tell me in the comments, honestly, if part of your own future already exists somewhere out there waiting. Does that thought comfort you, or does it quietly unsettle you? Until next time, keep looking up and keep making your next move, regardless of what the score sheet already says.